Okay, so we're going to make a start, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to come here tonight. I know most of you have probably heard from PMC and AMA at the Medical Student Information Nights, but we've got a more in-depth session tonight. So we've got speakers from PMCWA, so for those of you who don't know, Postgraduate Medical Council of Western Australia. We've also got speakers from the AMA WA and also from WA Country Health Service. So there will be time for questions at the end, so if you could just hold them right to the end, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. I've probably spoken to most of you about the intern application process. If anyone hasn't heard from either Notre Dame or UWA, can you stick up your hand? All right. I will gloss over, since most of you have, I'll gloss over the details, and if you've got any questions or you've already had a crack at trying to get in and you can't, come and talk to me afterwards. Caitlin, where am I moving on? It's the keyboard. Okay, from tonight, what we want to do is not so much talk about how to do the application physically, like I've been through at the unis with you, but to plan and prepare a correctly structured application that looks the best that it possibly can. And for the Category 1 students, you're going to get a job offer in WA, because that's part of the agreement that you're all very privileged to have. But if you apply to a hospital that's oversubscribed, they will rank the applications, and they don't know you, they know the application they've got in front of it, so it needs to be the best one that you can do. And if for no other reason, it's a really good practice session for future jobs and going into RMO if you want to move to a specialist hospital, or once you get into a registrar position or full on into your consultancy. As you know, the applications are open. I've had a look at the website today. Not all of you have applied yet. Closes by the 7th of June. That's the critical date. And leave some time, because it takes more than half an hour, even if you've got everything there, to attach and wait for it to do its little whirring and carrying on. So don't do it at 11:30 on Friday the 7th of June. On 15th is when you will get an offer via the post for the Category 1s, and every Category 1 intern in Australia will get an offer on the same day. And from there on, people start deciding to take a year off, or the churn begins between the different hospitals where there's some excess positions. Go to the site, take a photo of this, or that will lead you to the WA jobs clunky front page. Once you type in what application you want, it'll take you to the Med Jobs, which is much more streamlined. Where it's circled in yellow, just type in what you want, because you could also apply to be a teacher or a gardener or anything else on that site, so just WA Intern. And it'll take you to this, where it's an A4 size, so there's a bit more detail underneath about the job and what have you, but critically that will get you in with those hyperlinks there. The job description form here, I'll talk about that briefly. Every job, whether you're a junior doctor, a senior doctor, a teacher, a nurse, or whatever is in government, is attached to a job description form known as the JDF. There's a front page with a summary. The back page usually has the essential criteria, and sometimes you'll have desirable criteria, and they're just ways of splitting your application from everybody else's application and making you stand out a little more, and making sure that the person who's employing you gets someone who can do all the things that is actually required. And you'll see the first one there is primary medical degree. We can't take nurses, we can't take teachers, we need to take doctors into this application. Between the front and the back page, there's a couple of pages of description of just general chores and tasks and things that you'll be doing and expected of you as a junior doctor. Look at those, that this thing's attached within the application, because you can tailor your responses to that. I'm thinking for one of them, the ability to work effectively in healthcare. If you go to the JDF itself, the Fourth, you've got to communicate and coordinate between teams. They want you to communicate with patients. That's why they're asking you. So tailor your response. It's a bit of a cheat sheet, really. It will tell you what it is they're asking, but others tonight will go into more detail. Clicking on those hyperlinks will also take you into the application you want, which looks like this if you haven't had a look already. Demographics, other details, as I said to all of you before, once you've done that, you've done it kind of for life. You've just got to update your telephone number or address as you move. That's what we're going to be asking you. Things like residency status, make sure you've got your mum and dad to dig out the passport if it's stuck at home somewhere from the country. Things that are going to take a little time, others you'll have on you, obviously, and you'll be doing at the time. If any of this is particularly new to anyone, let me know, but otherwise I'll just skim over. You'll need to attach your CV, which we'll talk about tonight, responses to the selection criteria, and a cover letter. And remembering this is going to be a big year that's ahead of you. At each of the hospitals, it doesn't matter where you apply, there's a postgraduate medical education unit, and they're there to look after you. They're not there to employ you, they're not there to give you rosters, but they're there to kind of look after if you're really freaking out over anything or need some support, they're the people to go to. And there's also a doctor's health advisory service. And over the next few months, as you get indoctrinated into the hospital system, you'll be given more details on these. Okay, do I hand over to... Doing this one. Yep. I think I'll hand you over to Jason. We'll give you some more details.
Hello everybody, my name's Jason. I'm one of the Doctors in Training co-chairs on the AMA Council. This means that along with Beck Wood, who's the other co-chair, we represent all of the doctors in training from intern through to fellow, as well as the medical students on the State Council. So anytime you have issues, your reps bring it to council and we talk about it and then we raise it up so we can try and get things fixed for you. It's a very important organisation that you will learn more about as you go through your career. We're going to start off talking about the primary employing health services. There are 5 of them essentially this year, 4 next year. The first one we'll talk about is Fiona Stanley. All of the hospitals kind of will assess you on similar things, but each of them has little specifics that they actually rank a little bit higher. So if you already have your mind set on a specific hospital, it's quite important that you take note and make sure you highlight the things that they're looking for. With regards to Fiona Stanley, they just want to make sure your CV is up to date. Make sure it's legible, make sure it's readable. Don't use 9 font trying to squeeze more text on the page because it's going to be so small, they're not going to be able to read it and they'll just skim straight over it because we're a little bit older than you guys, so our eyesight's not as good. Bigger writing, easier to read, they'll actually take note of what you're saying. They want you to keep it brief, okay? Keep it brief and concise. Don't waffle. You'll find throughout my next 15-20 minutes, I'll waffle a lot, which is why when I write applications, I get someone else to proofread it to stop me from waffling. You might want to do the same. Fiona Stanley have mentioned that the score you get in your application, along with your intern matrix preference, will decide what terms you get for the year. This means the higher you rank, the more likely you are to get your higher preference. So while you're a Category 1 applicant, you're definitely going to get a job. You actually want to make sure you get a job that you enjoy, that has terms that you want to do. I was quite fortunate. I got my second preference, which means I got the 5 terms I wanted, just in a slightly different order to my first preference. You really want to rank well so you get the terms you want, okay? They're quite important. The only part I've got highlighted here is it's going to be used for your allocations, all right? So make sure you actually put in effort if you're applying for Fiona Stanley. Charlie's, again, very similar. They're going to look at your selection criteria. Make sure you answer all 4 of them. If you leave one off, your application doesn't count and it will not be considered. So if you forget to write, I'm a student at UWA and I will graduate in 2019, the rest of your application, all the amazing effort you've put into writing, your ability to communicate and your ability to work in a team will be for nothing. So make sure you answer all 4 questions. Don't miss any of them. Charlie's are definitely focusing on your commitment to WA Health, why you want to work here. Don't say, I want to work here because this is kind of where I studied and you've guaranteed me a job. Say why you want to work at Charlie's. Is there a specific term you want? Do you want to do neurosurge? Do you want to do rad-onc? Do you specifically want terms that they offer, or even rural places that they offer? Okay, Charlie's want to know why you want to work for them. They are also going to be ranking what block of terms you get on your application. Again, it's very important. Royal Perth Hospital, they're going in a slightly different path. They're still taking account for your actual application, but they're also going to be looking at your academic transcripts. This hasn't been done for many, many years because most people thought Ps get degrees, why put in effort? They're actually thinking that they might want somebody that's actually going to put in a little more effort throughout their studies so that they are academically a better intern. If you've got a P, don't worry, if the rest of it's up to scratch, you're still likely going to get a job. They want to know what you've done outside medicine, beyond your medical degree. Have you worked anywhere? Have you volunteered anywhere? They're quite interested in research and audits. As an intern, you're probably thinking, I don't want to study, I don't want to do an audit, I don't want to do research. I've spent anywhere between 4 and 8 years getting to this point. I just want to clock my brain off, go to work, get paid, and try and have a holiday. Unfortunately, it is so competitive in healthcare now. If you want to get onto BPT, you want to get into anaesthetics, or you want to get into surge, you need to start ticking boxes as early as you can. And Royal Perth want to help you prepare as an intern for your application later on in your medical career, which is why they're hoping you've done some sort of audit or some sort of research, and you will continue along this path if you get a job at Royal Perth. They also want to know if you've got any postgraduate qualifications. Do you have a master's in something? Do you have a PhD in something? Are you actually studying afterwards? That will also add points to your application. The other metro primary employing health service for next year is going to be St John of God. This is going to be an interesting one for all of us because it hasn't happened before. Those who get jobs there will most likely be quite well looked after because St John, through Joondalup, through Midland, tend to look after their people quite well. They will be looking at your academic record. Again, were you a P's get degrees person, or did you put in a little more effort and try and get distinctions? They want to know that you can work in a team. This one's kind of a given across all of the health services because every job you do is going to be team-based. You need to be able to work with other people to ensure all of the tasks for your team get done, but they want to see how you've done this in the past and how you will transfer that into your job with them. They want to know that you actually understand the roles offered by Midland and Subiaco, where they do a couple of terms. Have you spent time with them? Do you know what they offer as a specialty? If you actually go to Midland as an intern, you could get a paediatrics term, which you will get nowhere else, unless you happen to get Armidale, I think. You could get an ICU term as an intern, which is unheard of, but if you're lucky, you'll get to learn how to put in central lines and look after quite unwell people. Otherwise, you'll do stroke medicine. So they're not offering you the same core subjects or same core terms that the other 3 hospitals are. The 4th primary employing health service is going to be WACHS, and they will talk to you shortly. So if you've got specific interest in working at WACHS, which is an amazing place to work, make sure you pay extra attention because their application is slightly different. They want a little more out of you to prove that you actually want to work in the country as opposed to just having a holiday outside the city. Now we're going to talk about cover letter and CV, okay? They may sound very boring and you may think you've already done one because you got a job at somewhere. I got a job at Macca's when I was 15 or 16 and I had to do a job application for that. My CV, I thought rocked at the time. It wouldn't be worth the paper it was written on now. Okay, cover letter is optional. I used the cover letter when I applied and so did a lot of my friends because we had specific reasons on why we wanted to go to a hospital, and this is when we talked about that. When I was an intern, Fremantle was still open and was becoming Fiona Stanley. So I talked about wanting to be there because they had terms to Albany where I'd spent time as an RCS student. I also talked about their acute surgical unit, which is the model of surgery that I would like to work in. This is where you get to say why you want to work somewhere. If you want to work in trauma, if you want to go to Kalgoorlie, this is your chance to tell a hospital why they should employ you over someone else, okay? CV, 3 pages, one-sided. Again, don't use 9 font to try and squeeze stuff in. They will stop reading after a little while because they're going to read at least 350 of them and you want to make sure yours stands out. Catalogue your successes. Talk about awards you've won, things you've done. that the people beside you haven't done, okay? There are lots and lots of types of CVs. You can go onto Microsoft Word, you can go onto the internet, there are hundreds of them. Just choose one that you like, okay? Make sure at the top it's got your personal details and your email. My advice is use your personal email. Don't use your university one for any of this, for your application or on your communication, because when it comes time to be an RMO or a registrar or change to Children's or King Eddie's and all the information goes out for jobs, how many of you are going to remember your university student login details by the middle of June or August next year? If you just use your personal one, it's going to go straight to the one that you use on a regular basis. So make sure you use the correct personal details. Education qualifications, MBBS, MD, whatever it is, put in the basics of it. If you did an undergrad, include that. If you've done another master's, include that. Go back a couple of years. You probably don't need to go back to where you went to primary school because it's not super relevant. Research and publications. Pretty much everybody in this room is going to have done some sort of audit or research. MD programs make you do something. Even when I graduated from Notre Dame, we all did an audit. This is where you can put that in. You think your audit was pointless and Donna Mac gave you a 5 out of 10? Don't worry. Put it in because it's still going to look good on your CV, all right? For those that are not Notre Dame, Donna Mac is a wonderful person, but she will ride you for every little comma and spelling mistake across a 10,000-word document. Talk about your memberships in here. Are you an AMA member? Are you a member of a charity organisation? Are you a Freemason, if you're allowed to put that in there? Okay? Put in things that are going to separate you from the person sitting next to you. Talk about your community involvement. Do you belong to a sporting organisation? Do you volunteer there? Do you play? Do you work there as the physio? Do you help the juniors as an assistant coach? These are all things that you might think are pointless, but they make you look like somebody who is involved in a community, who can work within a team and who has the ability to communicate effectively. Okay, talk about your extracurricular interests and hobbies, if you actually have space on those 3 pages. I think I talked about scuba diving and skydiving because I did a lot of in the army, so I carried it across to my personal life. Things like this make you seem like you actually have a personality and you're not going to be a robot that walks around the wards ticking off jobs going job done, okay? They want somebody that's efficient, but they also want somebody that's going to become part of their culture and part of their team, all right? Let them know who you are. Referees. This is extremely important as an intern and it gets even more important as you progress. One of these for you guys has to be somebody that has supervised you on a clinical term. It has to be a registrar or above. So you can't use your friend that's an intern or an RMO that graduated 1 or 2 years ahead of you. Unfortunately, they don't count because they think they're probably going to be biased. Once you've selected your referees, my advice is contact the person. Either send them an email or go and talk to them. Because if they don't remember who you are and you're a student on their term in January and you're putting in your application now, they may or may not even reply to the email that comes out asking for their referees, okay? Contact them. You want to make sure you've got the right email address. I had friends apply for surgical training, get their referees down, put in an email address, and what do you know, that person hasn't checked that email address for over 12 months, so they didn't get a referee. It is important you contact these people, make sure they are happy to be your referee and they actually remember who you are, and make sure you have the appropriate contact address, because if they can't be contacted, they can't be a referee. Selection criteria. This is the part where you get to talk about yourself. Okay? It's suggested that there's a maximum of 500 words for each criteria. You will not use it for all of them, but you may for others, depending on your previous experience and how well you manage to sell yourself. Keep your answers succinct. Again, see how I'm waffling? Don't do this in your application. You need to demonstrate with examples why you're better than everyone else that's applying to that hospital. You need to show why you are the best. The year I applied to Fremantle, which became Fiona Stanley. They took 125 interns. Over 145 people applied for Fiona Stanley, which means some people didn't get their first choice. I imagine next year that a lot of people are going to be applying to Royal Perth because they have done wonders for their doctors in training recently. They take about 85 interns. There are about 350 of you. Make sure you sell yourself so you get the hospital you want to go to. Always be positive in your explanation. Say, I'm amazing, I did this and I did that. With regards to this, you talk about your experiences. Okay, I've worked with people for 5 years in the hospital system that never knew I was in the army, the SAS, that I went overseas and did all sorts of fun stuff and blew lots of things up. But in my CV, in my application, I can guarantee you it's on every third line because it shows I have the ability to work in a team, it shows I have the ability to work in a high-stress environment, and I can communicate across multiple platforms, all right? Sell yourself. Use the things that you have done in your past to make sure it's clear why you were the best person for the job. Always talk about, I did this, the outcome was this. Don't say, I once worked at Macca's, I had an argument with my manager and threw nuggets at her, told her she could cook her own nuggets and left. That's what I did as a 15-year-old, which meant I no longer had a job. Okay? Don't talk about things that didn't go so well, even if you think it was great at the time. Always review your statements from their point of view. Is this something they can understand? Don't use abbreviations. When I talked about my time in the army, I talked about being deployed to East Timor and Afghanistan, the types of operations I was on. I didn't use acronyms because no one outside my unit would have known what the acronyms were. Much like your experiences, if you've worked for football teams, you might use acronyms that no one else understands. If you've worked for a charitable organisation, no one else is going to know what you're talking about if you talk in your own jargon and your own lingo that you use in that organisation. Make everything as clear as possible, and again, make it positive. You can use a STAR model. There are multiple models that talk about how you should actually frame a sentence in a positive light. This is one, being the STAR model. So you need to outline your example. What did you do? When I was working for this organisation, we organised this event. My role was to coordinate all of the speakers, or to coordinate all of the finances, or the venue. How did you do this? I emailed people, I rang people, I followed them up to ensure that they were actually coming and they hadn't forgotten they were meant to be there. Result? The function was amazing. 100 people turned up, everyone had a great time, and everybody learned lots of things. Maybe 100 people, maybe more. Hopefully you learned something. This is the sort of thing you could talk about. I organised an event, people turned up, we taught them something, okay? Criteria, there are 4 of them. You guys are lucky, I think we do about 14 to be a registrar. Some of them follow through, so I still use some of my same answers from my internship for my registrar one now, slightly tweaked, but it is basically the same thing. So if you put good effort in now, it will give you a base for your future applications for King Eddie's, for Children's, for BPT or anaesthetics, all right? First one, criterion 1, primary medical degree. This can pretty much be a 2-sentence line, which is why they don't all have to be 500 words. You say, I am currently studying a MBBS for me at the University of Notre Dame. I will graduate in December 2014. End of paragraph. Move on to the next one. Make sure you put that in there, because if you tell them you did your undergrad in pharmacy or something else, it doesn't count. You need to say you're actually going to graduate, or you're hoping to graduate, from a university here in Australia. Criterion 2, a little more information. Ability to work effectively in a healthcare environment, okay? This is where you start selling yourself, how well you communicate, teams you've been involved in, jobs you've done. If you haven't actually worked in healthcare as a nurse or a physio or as an orderly trolley pusher, then there's other ways you can do this. You can talk about your time on teams. As a student in the emergency department at Fiona Stanley Hospital, I was given these responsibilities. This is how I did it. I was able to communicate with the patient, the nurse, and the RMO looking after the person, okay? Every experience you have has the ability to sell itself if you word it correctly. And while you may think, I've never worked anywhere, I've never volunteered anywhere, and I've never been part of a sporting organisation, you've done a lot in your time as a medical student. You just need to draw on it, okay? Go back into it in a little more detail. Good interpersonal skills. How do you communicate? Are you a good listener? Are you abrupt? Don't write that, but be aware of it, because when it comes to being an intern, if you're abrupt, we will tell you pretty quickly that you need to work on your interpersonal skills for your next application. Your ability to work in a multidisciplinary environment. Again, if you haven't worked anywhere because you've gone from high school to uni to med to now an internship, talk about your time on the teams in the hospitals, all right? Talk about how you interacted with the physio to try and get a clearance for Doris, who was waiting for an ACAP placement. This is all multidisciplinary, okay? Hopefully you've had some time in hospital and you haven't wagged the entire thing and gotten through on doing your assessments with some friendly registrar that vaguely remembers who you are. Draw on the experiences. If you don't quite know how to write any of this, Google it. There are actually sites, and there are 100 types of these things where you can Google how to be a doctor or how to write a job application to be a doctor. Most of them are American, so the language is a little weird, but they still give you really good examples on how you can sell yourself and the experiences you've used. Have you held any representative roles? Have you been part of WAMS? Have you been part of MSAND? Have you been part of AMSA? These are all things where you have to communicate. You may not actually think about it because it's something that you just do, but these are the things that allow you to give really good examples to people that actually recognise what this stuff is. Again, consider past employment history. This is where I waffled on about being in the SAS and being in Afghanistan and working with Americans in the mountains. Doesn't mean anything to anything I do now, but in my application it was great, which is probably why I managed to score so highly, because my grades definitely didn't get me my second preference. Okay? Selection criterion 3, commitment to working in WA. Why do you actually want to be here? Pretty simple, most of you probably live here. I grew up in a different state, so my answer had to be a little bit different to yours. I didn't have an attachment to community here because I didn't grow up here. So I talked about studying here, having developed communities here, relationships here. I talked about my time on RCS because RCS made me want to work rural. So talk about these sorts of things, you know. I'm not sure if any UWs go to a rural setting other than your rural GP. Notre Dame, talk about going to the Wheatbelt, talk about going to Derby or Fitzroy Creek or wherever you went. These are things that make you want to work in Western Australia. So this is what they want to read. You know, they don't want to read that as soon as I finish my internship, I'm moving to Melbourne because they got better coffee. Maybe true, but they don't want to hear it, all right? So talk about why you love Western Australia and why you think the health system here is better than everyone else, other than the fact you're going to be paid more than everyone else in Australia because of the amazing work the AMA does. Have to get a plug in. Selection criteria 3. Okay, talk about work you've done. Hospital settings is great. If it's not, it doesn't matter. You still need to word it and sell yourself in the same sort of way. Look at the criteria that the individual employing hospitals are looking for. Royal Perth, talk about audits, talk about research. If you're enrolled in a Masters at the moment as part of your MD at UWA, talk about it. This is the stuff that they're going to get really excited about because it shows you are really keen on furthering your own experience and being a well-educated and rounded doctor. All right? Last part, selection criteria 4, commitment to continue learning and academic experience. Excellent, sorry. This is where you talk about what you're going to do with your time as a doctor. You can also mention things like the grand rounds you've been to, conferences you've been to, seminars you've been to. Are you currently enrolled in a Masters? Are you currently enrolled in a PhD? Before I spoke here, I actually looked at my intern application, and on mine I think I said something along the lines of, I'm going to enrol in a Masters of Medical Education because I really want to be involved in teaching people that come after me. Didn't happen. I ended up enrolling in a Masters of Trauma, but again, it's still further education. This is what they want to see. They want to see that you're not going to get a job, turn the brain off, do the bare minimums and skate through, okay? And most of you from your studies will have something like this already in the pipeworks. And you also need to talk about how you plan on attending your intern teaching, which is mandatory. You'll attend as many grand rounds as you can within regards to areas of interest that you have, okay? You can also talk about awards you've won. So if you actually topped your school, amazing, well done. You can talk about seminars, there you go, seminars, workshops, research, audits. These are all the things that you can talk about. If you have mentorships, this is also a good thing that you can talk about. I'm pretty sure UWA, you will have a clinical mentor, someone that works in the hospital. You can actually do a little bit of, add that in if you don't have much else to say. Tips, submit your complete application on time. And we do mean complete. Like I said, don't accidentally miss a question, especially the first one, because it'd be quite easy to miss the fact that you don't actually have to write anything that you think about. If it's not complete, you won't be considered for a job, which means you'll be waiting next year for a job. Okay, check the pages, check the word counts, make sure that you don't just waffle and waffle and waffle. Highlight your strengths and again, get someone else to read it. Make sure that it actually makes sense, so somebody that doesn't necessarily think the way you do can still understand what you're saying. Formatting, keep it simple. My CV, I think I used navy blue as the headings and the rest of it was in black just to try and highlight the headings a little bit. Some people use lots of colour, some people use none. Okay, there are a million ways that you can format it. Just choose something that you're comfortable with, that you think looks professional and neat and easy to read. Last part there is be clear and succinct. Demonstrate your ability to communicate. What to avoid, as I said before, negative outcomes. Don't say I was involved in a MET, I was doing CPR, I lost count and everything went to shit and didn't go so well. Or don't say, I was given jobs by an intern and then I went home and remembered at 10 o'clock because I woke up with fright that I didn't actually do any of the jobs that were given to me. It sounds pretty straightforward, but just don't include things that don't go so well. All right? As I said, jargon, abbreviations, acronyms, I could throw out heaps of them from my time in the mining, from my time in the military, and you're not going to know what they are. So don't use them. Last part there, track changes in Word documents. Make sure you actually delete all of that. I'm writing research at the moment on our emergency laparotomies. The whole thing's full of track documents. I will hopefully remember to turn all of that off before I submit it to a paper. Make sure you do the same. All right, we're now going to hand back over to PMC and they will talk to you about everything else that will get you a job. Good luck. Hopefully I see you all working around the areas, and if not, I'll see you in the hospitals before then. Thank you.
Thank you, and just thanks, Jason. Just to reiterate, the hospitals will often print out hundreds of these applications, so if you've got 3 pages of CV, stick on the footer James Smith, page 1 of 3 or something like that, so if it gets lost in the bundle they know whose it is to reattach it once they've printed it. Sounds a bit obvious, but it does happen. As I said, you'll get offers from, I'll tell you about what happens after the offer process. You'll, on the 15th, get an offer via email. Accept it. You've got 48 hours because there's a whole big churn factor happening around the states of jobs that depend on you accepting or not accepting. If you've applied interstate, say yes to this one because it's the only one you're guaranteed. When you get another one, if you get another one, you've now got 2 to choose from. Pick one and cancel the other one so it frees it up. That's all we ask. For anyone going to the public hospitals, you will be offered a 3-year contract. You don't have to take it. If you know that you're not going to be here for 3 years, negotiate with the hospital and just say, I'd rather have a 2-year one, thanks. They don't mind. Those going to Midland are under a different EBA and they're offering 2-year internships. It makes no material difference. I wouldn't get strung up by thinking, oh, it's only a 2-year contract, not a 3-year, I'm not going to apply there. We've got the statistics on retention and doctors staying. By 3rd year, many of you will be working in registrar positions anyway and you won't be working on that contract. I've been around for quite a long time. Nobody doesn't get a job the next year unless you're absolutely terrible. And if you're absolutely terrible, you're not going to get the 3rd year of your contract anyway. So if somebody's only offering a 2-year contract, it's not necessarily something to be afraid of or think you're getting anything less than the 3-year. Everyone will progress from the 1st year to the 2nd if you get general registration. And you'll progress to an RMO as your 2nd year, so this time next year, you don't have, if you want to stay, if you've gotten to Charlie's and you want to stay at Charlie's, you don't have to do another whole application like this. What we ask you to do is go into that Med Jobs, make sure that all the details are up to date, and you just go, yes, I want to stay. Or it's a very similar kind of process. So it's a one button just to let the hospitals know who's staying with them and who's moving on. After you get your offer and you accept it, all the hospitals work on slightly different timelines, so I wouldn't get strung out if somebody's at Charlie's and they get a contract and you're at Royal Perth and you don't get one that week. It's just the way they all operate at slightly different times. It's about August. You'll get another package via email suggesting, with new starter information, and a lot of that is about your vaccinations, about your police clearance, a whole bunch of things that happen when you work for government and for a health service. They'll also put in a term preference. They look different at each of the hospitals. They're pretty much the same. Well, it's essentially the same thing, just badged in a different way. That's in about October. Jason was saying he got his second preference. We're told by the hospitals that they try really hard to get you within the top 10. If you're at Fiona Stanley, for example, there's 125 or 135 lines. You've got a preference from 1 to 135, and they hope to get you within the first 10. You know about your core terms. You've got to do your medical, surgery and ED. If you know you're going to be away for an overseas wedding or ski holiday, whatever you've got planned in a certain term, when you go down the matrix, don't pick a term that's a core term that happens in that time. Try and pick one at a later time or a different rotation, and a lot of them are just the same at different times. And so by about December, once you've chosen, you should get another email from the hospital of your choice, and they will be telling you what your terms are for the following year. Pulled out just a few of those. That's what the Fiona Stanley one looks like. The colours, pink for ED, blue for surgical, green for medicine. As you can see, this goes on, it's about that long. Quite a few of them, every term's a core term, and that's pretty good. A lot of them, it would be unusual at any of the hospitals for you to have 5 terms at one hospital. If you're at Charlie's, you might have a term or 2 up at Joondalup. If you're at Fiona Stanley, you might go out to Rockingham or Armidale, and it's part of the mix within the matrix that's offered. Royal Perths look a bit like this. Again, the same kind of thing. You just pick the one that you preference the most. There's a column there on the right, and I think they do, there's 17 preferences, and they do that times 5 for what they've got. Charlie's is just looking a bit blander than the others, but exactly the same thing. Rank down one side, you choose. They just haven't chosen to put the core terms in colours. We know as there's Midlands one with their very exciting pink PEDS terms and green ICU terms that nobody else offers. They're doing 4 terms as opposed to the 5 that are at the state hospitals, and that's actually okay because nobody's rotating into our system that's going to muck up terms and orientations. All the hospitals in WA used to have 4 terms, they turned to 5, there's been various, and within your junior doctor lifetime it may well turn back to 4 again. So around Australia it's about 50-50, whether they have 4 or 5 term interns and RMO terms. The dates, you've seen that before, it all opened last week for you. The hospitals have all, apart from Fiona Stanley, had their come to us evenings, where you might have made a decision on where you want to go and how you want to put your preference. I'll put you onto the WACHS people, who can give you some more details on the WACHS applications.
Hi everybody, I'm Nicole from the WA Country Health Service. Joe's also here from WACHS with me tonight. Both of us originally came from Fremantle, so we were listening to Jason's talk earlier, remembering those old days. How many of you are from the country? And how many of you are thinking about doing a term in the country? And how many of you are thinking about doing an internship in the country? Okay, cool. So all the things that everybody has said so far tonight apply to WACHS, plus a few other special bits and pieces, so that's why we're here to cover off on that. So in 2016, WACHS became a primary employing health service and started employing our own interns, starting off in Albany and Bunbury, and some expansion in a few years' time. And we also still have rotations from the metro hospitals, which we'll go through in a minute. WACHS is the largest country health service in Australia. It's 2.5 million square kilometres, and there's 7 regions, which you can see there, and we've got junior doctors in all of those regions, although there's interns in only 6 of them. So it's a very varied experience working in WACHS. And I'd say that a rural experience is valuable for you whether you want to be a country doctor for the rest of your life or whether you just want to have a bit of a clue about how it all works in the country, so that when you're a consultant at Fiona Stanley and you're sending your patients home or patients are being referred into you, you've got a good understanding of how it all works. So if we talk about, I might just put them all up there. I'm sure you've heard a bunch of talks about working in the country. Some of you have experienced it already. But these are the things that people tell us they like about doing their internship in WACHS, that there's a broad or a generalist flavour to the experience that you get. It's not subspecialised like the metro hospitals have become. There's longitudinal exposure to patient care, which means you might be admitting the patient, you might see them all the way through to discharge, you might see them again in follow-up clinics, maybe you're even going to run into them in the IGA. So it's a really holistic experience of medicine in the country. One-on-one learning, you're going to have a lot of contact with your supervisors who are going to be consultant specialists or GPs, and there's not that layer of RMOs and registrars in between you and them, so you're going to have a lot of one-on-one learning and you're going to get a lot of exposure to procedural skills. Also, things that people tell us they like the most about working in the country is the collegial atmosphere, being part of the community, and not surprisingly the work-life balance, because most of the time they're driving 5 minutes to get to work and they've got a parking spot right at the door, so something that they love the most about it is being able to have a life outside of work. And the other thing that's different about WACHS is you will spend all 5 terms at one hospital. You won't get rotated for half of your time to a subsidiary anywhere. People like to know about the support that's available in the country. So just quickly, financial support. If you're a WACHS intern, you will get a rental subsidy and a relocation allowance. If you're on rotation, you'll have fully furnished accommodation supplied to you as well as your relocation. And then if and when you become an RMO and you move up north, there's a higher salary to work up north, there's district allowances and other things available. Every region has a DCT and an MEO who are there to look after you, and the Central Medical Education Unit here has a team of 11 people who are also here to look after you, and you meet them during intern orientation week. The Central Medical Education Unit focuses a lot on developing pathways for those of you who do want to have a rural career. We work very closely with our partners, PMCWA, the AMA, Rural Health West, WAGPET, all of those guys here in the city to make sure we can develop pathways for your career. Just announced today our Aspire program, which is our rural surgical training program. There's another one coming soon called Raptor, which is the physician training pathway. And of course you'd all be aware of the rural generalist pathway that a lot of work's being done on nationally. We also work with the primary employing health services here in the city very, very closely, and they are all still linked to you if you go on rotation to the country from one of their hospitals, and you'll still get VC education from there as well as your local education. We've got simulation educators in every region and travelling ones. So as an intern, you can actually get onto an ALS2 course in a WACHS site, which is really unheard of in the metro hospitals. You'd be lucky to get on as a registrar. So really, it's a unique opportunity to understand how to practice medicine in an environment of more limited resources, the patient's desire to remain closer to home, and the distances involved in this state of ours. So as an intern in the country, you can be employed by WACHS at Albany or Bunbury for 5 terms each. You can be employed by Fiona Stanley and go to Albany or Broome. You can be employed by Royal Perth and go to Bunbury, Headland or Kalgoorlie, and Charlie's has rotations to Geraldton and Headland. Some of these line up for more than one term, so you can go, for example, to Broome and do Gen Med and Gen Surg back to back and stay there for 20 weeks, for example. So the application process is exactly what you've heard of already. Follow the PMC centralised recruitment process. Select WACHS as your first preference primary employing health service. Then rank your preferred sites. And you'll need to provide a statement of interest in a rural internship with WACHS. That's a maximum of 350 words. And then, Jason mentioned it, the cover letter is optional, but for WACHS, I'd highly recommend it because it's going to be another place where you can really sell yourself, tell us why you're a good fit for the country, why you want to go to the country. In your selection criteria, in your CV, in your statement of interest, in your cover letter, in all of those places, really let us know who you are, what your past links to the country have been, your future intentions, any research you've been doing that relates to the country, why you think this experience will benefit you, your understanding of what it means to work in a rural area. All of those things will add up to the picture that helps us decide whether we're a good fit for you and you're a good fit for us. Important to notice that each application is obviously assessed. WACHS assesses our applications first, and then the people who weren't selected will be given, their applications will be given to their second ranked primary employing health service. So those people will be in no disadvantage. Their applications will have gone straight to their second ranked primary employing health service. So if you just want to go to the country for 1 or 2 terms, you rank again your preferred primary employing health service, and then rank the sites that are offered by that health service. So if you choose Fiona Stanley, and then you preference Broome first and Albany second, and then you move on to your next employer, Royal Perth, choose Kalgoorlie first, whatever it is. It'll ask you your preferred number of terms, it'll ask you to state your interest, and then your application will be assessed by that primary employing health service. For example, Fiona Stanley will rank you, and then they'll give that application to us later on down the track after you've done your term rotation preferences, and ask us to rank you as well. And then together we'll duly assess and try to, as Maurice mentioned, try to get you within your top 10 preferences according to that dual ranking. So that's how that works. We have a bunch of flyers down the front that have got information to take home. Joe and I will be here to answer questions afterwards, or you can call us, email us anytime for more information. I think that I've covered anything, but if I've missed anything, feel free to come up and ask me afterwards.